My name is Dr. Cath Haddon. I'm a Senior Fellow at the Institute for Government and I'm a historian working in the Institute. I think the thing for me that got me into British politics in the first place was not so much contemporary politics, but actually the history. I was very lucky to do an MA that really took me into the archives, that got me to meeting people and doing interviews with people, hearing talks with people who'd served in the civil service in British government, and giving me a much more rounded idea about what goes on in policy making in government than you just get from watching the news and reading Twitter and things like that. My time when I got into it was before Twitter, of course, but yeah, the archives and the history of British government, because it wasn't something that I'd had a chance to study at school, so it really brought it all to life for me. The thing I like most about history as a way of looking at British politics, British government, is that it really gets you into what makes people tick and also gets you to thinking about what is evidence about what actually happened. We see a lot in the media of different people's accounts of what actually happened around something, arguments about who said what when, who wrote what when, and different ways in which it reaches us, whether it's media, whether it's memoirs, sort of political books that are written soon after events. History gives you that time to actually reflect on the quality of the evidence, try to probe a bit more about what really happened. And I also think it's very relevant for what's then happening in the world today, because it allows you to think about those forms of evidence, those kind of different perspectives that people have on any kind of historical events, the causal relationships, that you can start applying the same kind of lessons to what's going on in the world around you as you would do looking back on something. So the Institute for Government is something that looks at the mechanics of government. It tries to avoid looking, it's independent of government, doesn't look at policies in the sense of looking at the politics of things, whether we should or should not do certain kinds of policies, but it gets into the mechanics of how things work. I came to it from academia, and it's quite different in some ways because you do have to think about the so what a lot more. You have to think about what does this mean for what we should recommend, that changes should happen, that the government should do more of or less of. It still allows me a certain amount of getting into the depth of it. We do a lot of quality assurance to make sure that our research is really good and our evidence has to be good, because we're trying to persuade people to change what they're doing. So we have to make sure that our evidence is good for that. I do sometimes miss the chance to really get into an issue quite deeply and to spend a lot of time on it and to take my time thinking about what I want to say. Sometimes you can be working on 5 or 6 different topics, different issues in any one day, and then the news blows up and there's a whole new load of things that you need to think about. So it can be a much faster environment. That has good sides, but it also has downsides as well. I think a student should study both politics and history. I think it's really important for us to understand the political system we operate in and to take part in it. And it doesn't mean you need to be an activist, but it is useful to know what kind of laws are going through in your name, how your money, public money, is being spent, what kind of services that you can access. And studying politics also allows you to then not just observe it, but also to sort of participate in talking about how it should change, how it should do better. I think history is really important for understanding how we've got to the system that we currently have. I think it really helps understand where a lot of these debates have come from, all the sort of topics we've talked about today. They are steeped in British history, and also because we have exported this around the world, countries that have sort of modelled their system of government on ours. So understanding the history of how ours came to be, and understanding how it ended up getting sort of exported around the world really tells you a lot about the kind of things that others also have to do to try and improve their political system. So it's not just a British focus, it's also got an international dimension.